Here's a guy right off the top that obviously is one of the most coveted corners in college football, a guy that we've talked about many times out of Washington, Thaddeus Dixon.
Thaddeus Dixon is a guy that everybody wanted. There was a lot of rumblings. We weren't sure if it was going to be similar, if he was going to, join Zacharias Davis and Ephesians over and remain at Washington. Those were two talented corners that Washington was able to pick up. Or was he going to be on the move? Where was he looking? Well, speaking of Bill Belichick and UNC and really investing their money, it looks like, and Thaddeus Dixon will be heading to join Bill Belichick in Chapel Hill. We think one of the key things in this market we had kind of alluded to a couple shows ago when we're kind of seeing, we knew that there was mutual interest between UNC, obviously a visit and whatnot, but that Bill Belichick was going to do Bill Belichick things, and what not better, like we said, it's all about relationships. So Bill Belichick goes out there and hires a Washington DB coach, brings him on staff. So why not help lure in Thaddeus Dixon? I really think again that was a key component. Obviously the NIL, but I think that was a strong proponent in bringing Thaddeus Dixon to UNC. Again, he had tons of suitors. We thought maybe he would stay at Washington and join Takario and Ephesians as two top corners that they were able to get. But it looks like he's going to be heading to Chapel Hill.
And not only him, but of course, North Carolina looking to the offensive line position and looking for some help there in the Sun Belt Conference from Troy.
Despite the money that UNC and Corey alluded to as far as NIL, they definitely have not been quiet as far as it's money is no option, or to allude to Jermaine Dupri's song, money ain't a thing. There's definitely money ain't a thing when it comes to NIL and Bill Belichick. However, Bill Belichick really hasn't exhausted that NIL that seems to be in abundance. He's really gone to what we talked about. Most of his roster for the transfer portal has been built on FBS schools, smaller schools. So he wants to continue to build that offensive line. We've talked a lot about across the season. We talked about it with Corey Smith and NC State, how they're looking to build, and protect their quarterback. Well, Bill Belichick is doing the same thing, and he picks up a talented Troy offensive tackle, Daniel King, and he's going to be heading to Chapel Hill. So again, Bill Belichick looking to build his roster, with those unhidden gems. And it makes me wonder too, how he's approaching his high school signing class, because just kind of looking, he's really been on the move when it comes to the high school recruiting, going after the top 4 and 5-star guys. So obviously it might be interesting to see if they're going to use that NIL money, and they're going to try to kind of pour it into their young talent and develop. Again, I think the question is, will Belichick stay? As Corey alluded to, obviously, that's kind of a wishy-washy, because as much as we talk about, what Bill Belichick can bring to the program, there's also that means, especially with the younger guys who are looking to start, and more importantly, looking to develop, that UNC can kind of be one of those things. It looks good from afar, but in the long run, there's a lot of questions if Bill Belichick will stay. But again, I'm interested to see if UNC is going to take a lot of that money as far as the NIL, and they're going to invest it, because again, a lot of the offers, like we said, are going out, and he's definitely not wasting time putting in the offers for 4 and 5-star talents that we've heard about. And some of the guys we'll be talking about, later, that, really are feeling a big push from Chapel Hill and Bill Belichick to come play for the 26 class and even the 2027 class. So really interesting to see if they're going to, obviously build on the portal, but another big thing, are they going to use that money and they're going to go invest it on building that foundational roster? And is it going to start with young talent, elite young talent, and blue talent? Because there's one thing, the recruiting cycles always kind of shift as far as the high school, but man, this 2026 class and 2027 class is extremely talented. Some of the names that you've probably heard us mention are going to be mentioned, later today. But this 2026 class, from what I've seen across the All-American circuit and what I'm seeing continue, man, extremely productive. And these guys, a lot of them really look like they're college ready. So in Bill Belichick's mind, I think too, he's going to go try to pluck those guys that he knows that's top talent and possibly try to invest it. So it's going to, like I said, it's going to be really interesting to see if UNC is going to use that money to be able to, build foundational talent. And, make some big time signees in that 2026 class and that 2027 class. But a lot of exciting things definitely happening despite the contracts not being signed, despite all the rumblings.
A guy that should be ready for the SEC after a productive season at Duke is Star Thomas, who's moving on to Knoxville.
Yep, he is. He's going to be a Bull. He's going to be a Bull. And Star Thomas, I mean, if that's not a running back name, he's broken all sorts of records. He definitely was a staple. So again, the Bulls were suffering in the wide receiver room trying to get that momentum, and they definitely hit the portal this season to try. But getting the addition of Star Thomas is really going to help their run game and their ground game. Obviously, we've seen, especially in the SEC, in some of the critical moments and some of the critical playing, especially in the red zone, just what a difference having a strong run game and running back depth can do. And I think Star Thomas is definitely going to be that addition for the Bulls run game, and hopefully get that ground game going and build upon that after a big loss in the wide receiver room for the Bulls.
I got to say that I was aware of Deshaun Purdy. I knew of him. I'd seen him play a little bit. Of course, he was at Charlotte, but I learned a lot from you, LeeAnn, about Deshaun Purdy and your scouting of him a few years ago. And now he's made his decision.
Yeah, this is another interesting one. Talk about the quarterbacks in a merry-go-round, in a Ferris wheel from the high school circuit to the transfer portal. Deshaun Purdy, like I said, you can see a lot of talent at this at Navy All-American Combine. He's one of the kids that I scouted a couple years back before, really under the radar. Again, I was really surprised why he hadn't had more offers. He ultimately, like you said, was committed to Charlotte, and then enter the transfer portal after a short time there. Really young, fresh talent. It was no surprise when Florida was recruiting him when he came available. We've seen what Florida's been able to do with DJ Lagway, another name that you've heard me talk endlessly about, who's another kid who's really translated and really taken Florida to its next step. They were looking to bring him in. But again, in like we say in the world of recruiting, things are constantly evolving, changing, and it looks like he will be flipping his commitment after signing with Florida to come on to help create some competition and be kind of the backup guy to build strong depth for DJ Lagway. It looks like instead he's going to be hitting back to the ACC, and he's going to be a Deem Deke and is joining Wake Forest as their next quarterback to build on.
I would not want to be in some of these administrative offices processing the paperwork when a guy makes a transfer and then changes his mind like 48 hours later, like we saw with Jonte Cook, Texas to Washington, and then see ya, I'm headed somewhere else at this point. All right, next up, Amari Niblack is a guy that I've watched a lot. Two huge stops, obviously, being both a Bama and a Texas player at tight end. And now he's made his decision.
Exactly. Like he has made some stops in big programs, so definitely he brings experience. Not a lot of playing time, but again, he's exhausted his eligibility at Texas, and now he's looking to not go too far from home, joining arch rival in College Station and the Texas A&M Aggies. So again, this will be a Texas A&M with a nice pickup in Amari Nickelback. Again, SEC experience. I think he will have no problem, obviously, with the departure of Donovan Green heading to LSU from Texas A&M. This was definitely in an area that Mike Elko was looking to pick up as far as the tight end. And I think they're going to have a nice addition. He's going to be a nice depth piece, and I think he'll be very productive. Again, again, with the kind of SEC experience that he brings, obviously at Alabama for 2 seasons and with a short time at Texas, I think it will be a good fit for him down in College Station.
All right, we keep moving down the list, and we go to Ole Miss. Builds another top wide receiver. Okay, this is probably the biggest addition we saw over the weekend because Trey Wallace had done some nice things, obviously, at Penn State and was one of their leading guys, and now he is headed to the SEC.
He is. We know that Lane Kiffin and his offense, they sure do know how to develop wide receivers, and you can never have too many wide receivers, just like you can never have too many running backs down in Oxford. Trey Wallace, former Penn State standout, is heading to Oxford, and he will be joining Ole Miss as part of that wide receiver room. Of course, the wide receiver, really, Lane Kiffin has done a fabulous job this offseason as far as bringing in some top transfer portal wide receivers, and I think that Trey Wallace will be an excellent addition and definitely will be something that they can build upon. I think he'll be another instant impact player. I think that's what makes a receiver like Trey Wallace so attractive, is the fact that they're experienced. But like what Corey was saying, nowadays, you want somebody that you can kind of step into. And a lot of these guys that, I mean, look at his experience at Penn State after, 4 seasons. He's been productive. He's been a consistent, and that's a lot of times we don't talk about. Sometimes players don't have the opportunity wherever they stop to be able to, make their way or make their mark. But, you know, um, a kid like Trey Wallace has definitely made his mark, and he's been consistent. And I think that consistency is something you can build upon, and definitely, which that he brings experience and talent. I think he's going to bring a nice addition. I think he's going to bring something new to the wide receiver room because he's a non-SEC. He's a non-SEC guy. I think sometimes, when we get those out of conference talents, they bring a new dynamic. They bring something different because they've been playing in a different conference. It's almost kind of like that X factor. So it's going to be interesting to see just what kind of role Trey Wallace will. But I think it's going to be a nice fit for Lane Kiffin and building that, continuing to build that signature depth in that wide receiver room from the portal.
And to that point, Keandre Lambert-Smith, who was starting wide receiver at Penn State, had a nice career there, transferred to Auburn, turned out to be, well, you could argue, Cam Coleman, the more explosive, high-ceiling receiver, but the more dependable guy turned out to be Keandre Lambert-Smith from Penn State. And just to clarify, if you were not entrenched in Penn State football, but maybe you caught a couple games and you might be a little bit confused, he goes by Trey Wallace. He also goes by Harrison Wallace. That's his official name. And so during the broadcast, they were kind of interchangeable, whether it was Trey Wallace or Harrison Wallace and Wallace the third. But just to clarify there. All right. And then we've got an offensive pickup along the line for, I believe, Kentucky.
Kentucky has been looking this entire offseason again. Mark Stoops has been going in there trying to build, that Jekyll and Hyde that Kentucky, they've just had so much promise, but haven't quite been able to figure out what works and what doesn't work. But one of the things they definitely have been looking to bolster is that a unity, that camaraderie in the trenches, and they've already picked up an offensive lineman earlier in the transfer portal, but they have a nice addition in one of the top guys as far as the offensive front in New Mexico State, Shiaz Pete. I think he's going to be an excellent addition, and I think that he comes to the Cats really going to be a central part of being able to provide that protective front that was very much lacking and couldn't be, that wasn't consistent all the way through. Like we said, on the defensive side of the ball, Kentucky definitely have sparks. They will definitely forever be remembered in Ole Miss fans' history for the guys who helped, who stopped us from getting the playoffs and so forth. But again, Kentucky, despite the talent that it's had in its bolster, we saw a lot of their guys be high commodity, players in the transfer portal. They just haven't found a way. If you're a Kentucky fan or you're like me, who's covered Kentucky, from Joker Phillips to now, that it's a very Jekyll and Hyde. There's a lot of talent there, but Mark Stoops just really hasn't found a way to be able to make it click consistently. So I think this rebuilding and making the offensive and defensive lines a priority down in Lexington. There was so much hype coming into last year's transfer portal roster that he was able to build. There was a lot of top talent that he was able to build. So I think this year they're kind of regressing and really hoping that they can really find some playmakers versus having a overly hyped transfer portal. And hopefully in this round of the transfer portal, if they get it right and these players will actually translate and really help build a team. But again, I think this is a great building block to be able to rebuild these offensive and defensive fronts in New Mexico State. Shiaz Pete.
So this just came down since we've been on the air. Of course, Ohio State and Notre Dame playing in the national championship game. So those players, many of them stayed with their teams throughout the entire process of the playoffs. And now we're seeing the floodgates open and maybe the most prominent for Ohio State is backup quarterback Devin Brown. Now, he was good enough to take the quarterback battle right down to the wire with Kyle McCord in 2023. As you can see right there, he was a top 50 recruit, and he's moving on to Cal. LeeAnn, we've talked so many Cal quarterbacks over the last couple of weeks, Chandler Rogers and Sagapulatelli. I don't know who's there and who's not at this point. Of course, Fernando Mendoza left to go to Indiana, so it appears as though Devin Brown would be in line to be the next starter. And you also have some Ohio State transfer portal news.
Well, with Ohio State and Notre Dame, as we know, concluding in the national championship, it also gives the opportunity for players who are interested in the transfer portal. I believe they will have 5 days in order. This one just was like swifter than flash when it went down. Ohio State edge Mitchell Melton didn't waste any time. He hit the portal, I believe, within less than 24 hours. He was committed to Virginia, so he'll be heading, and he will be a Cavalier joining the ACC. So Ohio State edge Mitchell Melton heading to see if he can make things happen in the ACC with UVA.
All right, LeeAnn, my favorite part of the show. And if I've got my bass voice with me today, it comes and goes. So we got the rumblings here with a Montana State running back.
Yeah, there's not too many rumblings going on. Like we said, the portal officially closed, well over a couple weeks ago, but there's still a lot of action going on. Obviously, we'll see what kind of turnover that Ohio State and Notre Dame will have as far as, their current portal situation after concluding with the national championship. But there's always something to go down, even though with the winter portal closing. Montana State running back Scottrey Humphrey has been one that has been in the portal, I believe, since the 8th of January. So he's been in the portal, kind of resonating, laying low. But again, another star quarterback, running back that everybody's been looking at. UNC seems to be the place where we're hearing that he's really having, kind of where he's leaning towards. But Boise State, Ole Miss, West Virginia, and Virginia Tech are also some of his top schools. So, he kind of narrowed it down to those top schools, but we're hearing that UNC is kind of the guy to be. Obviously, I don't know how much Ole Miss will be in the mix after. Obviously, we know that they've picked up two top running backs recently, so we're not sure if Kevin Smith is going to look to add a fourth transfer portal running back. But again, he's shown interest in Ole Miss. But right now, it looks like UNC is after the highly touted Montana State running back. He was All-American. He led Montana State in the FCS championship. He had 1,386 yards, 16 touchdowns in over 15 games his entire season, averaging 7 yards per carry. In 2024, he broke Troy Anderson's single season program record. So again, he's a playmaker. As a true freshman in 2023, he ran for 441 yards, 8 touchdowns. So if we're talking about production and a big playmaking ability, Scottrey Humphreys definitely had it. And we've seen all season long, as far as this winter portal, that the FCS running backs have really made a splash and have been a high commodity. And again, Scottrey Humphrey, he's kind of been laying low, but again, wherever he goes, and we're hearing that it looks like Chapel Hill, but again, the other schools are in the mix, obviously, but wherever he's going to go, I have no doubt that he's going to be a star addition and continue. Again, over 2 seasons as a true freshman, going into a sophomore season, he's going to bring a lot, obviously, to the table, and brings a lot of years of eligibility, which is also, got to be enticing when you want to bring him on, because again, it's really rare to get a guy that's that productive as a true freshman and as a sophomore, even at the FCS level, and then be able to bring him on to continue that role. I mean, with a program that probably wherever he goes, definitely is in a program where he'll have more opportunity. But again, the All-American running back out of Montana State definitely is looking at 6 schools, but we're thinking that what we're hearing is UNC and Bill Belichick is the school to beat.
Okay. We talked Penn State wide receivers in the last couple of weeks. Kyron Hudson came from USC to Penn State earlier in the show, of course, with Trey Wallace. And Amari Evans is a guy that saw spot playing time for Penn State, caught 21 passes, and he's staying in the Big Ten, but not what we think of the Big Ten being, one of those new teams in the Big Ten.
He is, and what we're he's looking. He went and he was looking at Washington. That was one of the places, obviously, that's been a hot topic, a bit a hot destination for portal comings and goings. But he's out of Colleen Shoemaker, out of high school. And what the school that we're hearing that really has the edge is Texas Tech. So it looks like he's really going to go, back to his roots right now. They seem to be the heavy favorite. Another school to watch in his recruitment, obviously, would be Syracuse. So that's another school that's been heavily recruiting. We're also hearing that Texas has been also looking at him as well. So again, Amari Evans. He led Penn State in yards per catch, 19.8. He had 8 deep receptions, and then 300 deep receiving yards, and he was extremely explosive and had 5 touchdowns during his time there. So again, he's another guy that hasn't had a lot of time, but every time that he's been able to make a splash, he really, does make a splash and has been a consistent in that Penn State roster. But again, Colleen Shoemaker out of Colleen Shoemaker High School in Colleen, Texas, looking to maybe go back home to Texas. Texas Tech and the Red Raiders. We know what they've been able to build as far as what they could offer him as far as NIL. That's another program that we don't talk a lot about, but Texas Tech really has been kind of one of the innovators when it comes to NIL and collectives as far as being able to entice players. They built a quite a roster, from the transfer portal, and they're possibly looking to add, with Amari Evans. But again, Syracuse and obviously Steve Sarkisian in Texas are looking, to bring his in-state talent and bring some depth to that wide receiver room, especially, with the exitings of, several players, Jonte Cook, who really didn't find his time despite his talent or his place at Texas. So again, Amari Evans looking to possibly head to Texas Tech fresh off a visit to Washington. So that's another recruitment we'll be watching closely. And as soon as we get some more intel, we'll let you know.